Hey there! Welcome back to Garden Crumbs, the channel where we dig into the simple, affordable fixes that actually work in your garden. I'm so glad you're here today because what I'm about to share with you might just be the most underrated gardening hack sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. I'm talking about plain old 3% hydrogen peroxide, the brown bottle, the one you probably have tucked behind your Band-Aids and your ibuprofen. You paid maybe $2 for it, and I'm willing to bet you've never once thought to bring it outside to your garden beds or your potted plants. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Hydrogen peroxide is for cleaning wounds, not watering plants. And that's fair. But here's the thing. Hydrogen peroxide at the right concentration and in the right applications is one of the most versatile and genuinely effective tools a home gardener can have. But before we dive in, I also want to make sure you walk away knowing what not to do, because there are a few common mistakes people make with hydrogen peroxide in the garden that can seriously hurt your plants. So we'll cover those too, right at the end. Okay, let's get into it. 1. Killing fungus gnat larvae, hidden in your soil. Let's start with the one that honestly drove me to try hydrogen peroxide in the first place. Fungus gnats. If you've ever had those tiny, annoying little flies hovering around your houseplants or your garden containers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're not just a nuisance. The adult gnats you're swatting away are actually the least of your problems. The real damage is happening underground, where their larvae are feeding on your plant's roots and the organic matter in your soil. Here's why they're so hard to get rid of with normal methods. Fungus gnat larvae live in the top 2 inches of moist soil, and they thrive when you keep that soil consistently damp. They lay hundreds of eggs at a time, and the cycle repeats before you even realize what's happening. Yellow sticky traps catch the adults, sure, but they don't touch the population living in the soil. That's where hydrogen peroxide comes in. The way it works is actually kind of fascinating. Hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, is essentially water with one extra oxygen atom attached. When it hits organic matter in the soil, it breaks apart and releases that extra oxygen as a burst of bubbles. That release is what kills the larvae. It disrupts them at the cellular level. And here's the beautiful part. After it does its job, it breaks down completely into plain water and oxygen. There's nothing harmful left behind. In fact, that little burst of oxygen actually aerates the soil and benefits the root zone. To use it against fungus gnats, the first thing you need to do is let your soil dry out. I mean really dry out, about 2 finger lengths deep. Fungus gnats need moisture to survive, and drying the soil out before treatment makes the peroxide much more effective because the larvae are already stressed. Then mix 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide with 4 parts water. So if you're filling a standard watering can, you'd use roughly 1 cup of hydrogen peroxide to 4 cups of water. Water your plants with this solution just like you normally would, making sure it soaks all the way down through the root zone. When you do this, you'll notice the soil start to fizz and bubble. You might even see a little foam at the surface. Don't panic. That is exactly what you want to see. That's the hydrogen peroxide doing its work, releasing oxygen and taking out the larvae in the process. Do this treatment once a week for about 3 to 4 weeks to break the gnat life cycle completely. And going forward, try to let your soil dry out more between waterings. Fungus gnats can't establish themselves in dry conditions, so prevention really does start with your watering habits. 2. Rescuing overwatered plants and stopping root rot. Okay, let's move on to one of the most heartbreaking things that can happen to a gardener. Root rot. Whether it's a beloved potted plant, a raised bed that got hit with too much rain, or a container that just doesn't have great drainage, overwatering is one of the top killers of houseplants and garden plants alike. And here's the cruel irony. Root rot doesn't look like a water problem on the surface. The plant starts to wilt. You think it's thirsty, you water it more, and then the situation gets worse fast. What's actually happening down in the roots is that the soil becomes completely saturated and oxygen-starved. Roots need oxygen to function. When they're sitting in waterlogged soil, they can't access it. They begin to die. And as they die, harmful bacteria and fungal pathogens move in and feed on the decaying tissue, spreading the rot further and further up the root system. This is where hydrogen peroxide becomes genuinely life-saving for your plants. Remember, H2. O2 is water with an extra oxygen atom. When you apply it to waterlogged soil, It immediately delivers a shot of that critically needed oxygen directly to the root zone. It also acts as an antibacterial and antifungal agent, killing off the pathogens that are driving the rot while simultaneously addressing the oxygen deficiency that's allowing them to take hold in the first place. For this treatment, you want a slightly stronger ratio than the gnat drench. Mix 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide with 1 cup of water. That's about 250 milliliters. Apply this directly to the base of the affected plant, right at the soil line. You can do this once every few days as you work to improve drainage and reduce your watering frequency. A couple of important notes here. First, make sure you're also addressing the underlying cause. If the pot has no drainage hole, add one, or repot the plant. If your raised bed is waterlogged because of compacted soil, work in some perlite or coarse sand to improve drainage. Hydrogen peroxide can treat the immediate crisis, but it can't fix a structural drainage problem on its own. Second, if you can see the roots and they're already brown and mushy, carefully trim those damaged sections away with sterilized scissors before treating the soil. Removing the dead tissue gives the plant a fighting chance and keeps the rot from spreading to the healthy roots that are still intact. 3. Spraying for aphids and spider mites. The right way. Now let's talk about 2 of the most common soft-bodied pests you'll encounter in any garden: aphids and spider mites. Aphids cluster on new growth, on the undersides of leaves, and along stems. They pierce plant tissue and suck out the sap, weakening the plant and spreading disease. Spider mites are even sneakier. They're barely visible to the naked eye, and they often don't show up until you've got a full-blown infestation on your hands, signaled by fine webbing on your plants and yellowing, stippled leaves. Both of these pests can be knocked back significantly with hydrogen peroxide. The way it works is mechanical as much as chemical. The oxidizing burst of H2O2 breaks down the soft, waxy protective coating on their bodies. Without that protection, they dry out and die quickly. To use hydrogen peroxide as a pest spray, mix 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide with 1 gallon of water. That's about 3.7 liters. Pour this into a clean spray bottle or garden sprayer. When you apply it, you need to coat both sides of the leaves, especially the undersides, because that is where aphids congregate and where spider mite colonies typically start. Make sure you're getting good coverage on every leaf you treat. And here is the most important part of this tip, so please pay attention. Only spray in the early morning or in the late afternoon when the sun is low and temperatures are cooler. Never, ever spray hydrogen peroxide on your plants in direct, midday sunlight. When hydrogen peroxide is applied to wet leaf surfaces in bright sun, the combination of the oxidizing action and the heat can cause immediate leaf burn. You'll see brown, scorched patches appear within hours, and in severe cases it can damage an entire plant in one application. Morning and evening spraying lets the solution do its job on the pests, then evaporate safely before the heat of the day kicks in. For active infestations, spray every 2 to 3 days for about 2 weeks and always check for new growth because aphids especially love to hide in the tender, unfurled leaves at the tips of your plants. 4. Soaking seeds. Before planting for faster, stronger germination. This is the tip that surprises the most people when I mention it, but it might be my personal favorite because the results are so visible and so reliable. Here's what's actually going on with most seeds sitting in a seed packet. The seed coat, the outer shell of the seed, can contain naturally occurring germination inhibitors. These are chemical compounds that, in nature, prevent a seed from sprouting at the wrong time or under the wrong conditions. They're a survival mechanism, but in your garden, they can slow down germination significantly. On top of that, the surface of seeds can harbor dormant fungal spores that, once the seed is in moist soil, start to grow and can attack the embryo before it even has a chance to emerge. Soaking your seeds in 3% hydrogen peroxide before planting addresses both of these issues at the same time. Here's how to do it. Pour a small amount of 3% hydrogen peroxide straight from the bottle, no diluting, into a small bowl or jar. Drop your seeds in and let them soak for 5 to 10 minutes. Not longer than that. Hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizer, and soaking seeds for too long can actually damage the embryo inside. which is the opposite of what you want. After the soak, pour the seeds into a fine mesh strainer and rinse them thoroughly under cool running water. This removes any residual peroxide before you move on to planting. What this process does is twofold. First, the peroxide softens and slightly loosens the seed coat, which helps moisture penetrate to the embryo more quickly and triggers the germination process faster. Second, it kills off any fungal spores sitting on the surface of the seed before they get a chance to cause problems in the soil. Gardeners who use this method consistently report seeing germination happen roughly twice as fast compared to seeds that were planted with no pre-treatment. That's especially valuable when you're working with slow germinating varieties like parsley, carrots, or peppers, where a week or two of waiting for sprouts can feel like forever. One small note, this technique works best on larger, hard-coated seeds. Very tiny seeds, like those from basil, lettuce, or petunias, can sometimes be more sensitive to the oxidizing effect, so use a shorter soak time of around 3 to 5 minutes if you're trying it with fine seeds for the first time. 5. Sanitizing garden tools and old pots. Alright, let's talk about the tip that most gardeners skip. And then wonder why their plants keep getting sick year after year. Your old terracotta pots. Your plastic containers that have been sitting in the garage since last October. Your pruning shears, your trowel, your grafting knife. Every single one of these items can be carrying fungal spores, bacterial pathogens, and disease residue from the previous growing season. When you plant new seedlings in an unwashed pot or take cuttings with contaminated pruning shears, you're essentially inoculating your healthy plants with whatever took out the old ones. Most people either skip cleaning entirely or rinse their tools with a quick blast of the hose and call it good. That's not sanitizing. That's just rinsing off the dirt while leaving the microorganisms right where they are. Hydrogen peroxide, on the other hand, is a genuinely effective broad-spectrum sanitizer. It kills bacteria, fungi, and many viruses on contact. And because it breaks down completely into water and oxygen after use, it leaves behind absolutely zero toxic residue. You don't have to worry about it leaching into your soil, harming your plants, or leaving a chemical film on surfaces that your hands are going to touch. To sanitize your tools and pots, pour undiluted 3% hydrogen peroxide into a spray bottle. Spray it generously onto the blades of your pruning shears, into the inside of containers, and along the surfaces of any tools you want to clean. Let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes. Give it time to do its work. Then wipe it down with a clean cloth or paper towel. You do not need to rinse afterward. The peroxide will continue to break down on its own, and within a few minutes, what's left is just water. No harsh chemical smell, no residue, nothing harmful. Do this at the start of every planting season, and again anytime you're working with plants that were sick or infested. It takes maybe 5 minutes, and it can save you from losing an entire bed of seedlings to a pathogen that hitched a ride on your trowel from last year. 3 mistakes you need to avoid. Before we wrap up, I need to be very direct about 3 things you must not do when using hydrogen peroxide in the garden, because each of them can cause real harm, either to you, to your plants, or both. The first mistake is mixing hydrogen peroxide with vinegar. I see this come up a lot online because people assume that 2 natural, safe household products mixed together must be extra effective. They're not. Mixing hydrogen peroxide and vinegar, even in the same spray bottle, creates a compound called peracetic acid. Peracetic acid is a powerful corrosive substance. It can cause serious irritation to your skin, your eyes, and your respiratory system, and it is potent enough to kill plants outright. Never combine these 2 in the same container, even for a few seconds. The second mistake is using any concentration other than 3%. The bottle you buy at the drugstore is 3%, and that is the only concentration you should use directly in your garden without very careful additional dilution. Hydrogen peroxide also comes in 10%, 20%, and 35% concentrations. The 35% version is sometimes called food grade or industrial hydrogen peroxide. These higher concentrations are extremely aggressive oxidizers. Applied at the same ratios you'd use the 3% version, they will burn your plant roots, scorch your leaves, and potentially cause chemical burns on your skin. If you ever come across a stronger is better tip about garden peroxide, please be very skeptical and very careful. The third mistake is storing hydrogen peroxide in the wrong container. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down rapidly when exposed to light. If you transfer it from the original dark brown bottle into a clear or transparent spray bottle and leave it on a sunny shelf or in a sunny garage, you may end up with little more than plain water by the time you go to use it. Always store hydrogen peroxide in its original, opaque bottle, keep it in a cool, dark location, and transfer it to a spray bottle only when you're ready to use it. Okay, that's a wrap on today's video. 5 practical, science-backed ways to use 3% hydrogen peroxide in your garden, plus the 3 critical mistakes you need to steer clear of. Let's do a quick recap. Use the 1:4 dilution to drench your soil and wipe out fungus gnat larvae. Use the tablespoon per cup formula to rescue plants that are suffering from overwatering and root rot. Mix 1 tablespoon per gallon for a pest spray that takes out aphids and spider mites. But only in the morning or evening, never in full sun. Soak your seeds in straight 3% peroxide for 5 to 10 minutes before planting to speed up germination and kill surface fungi. And spray undiluted peroxide on your tools and old pots to sanitize them before each season. $2 at the drugstore. 5 genuine tested uses. No synthetic chemicals, no harmful residue, and no need to order anything special online. If you give any of these a try, I'd love to know how it goes for you. Drop your experience in the comments below. What you treated, what concentration you used, and how your plants responded. This community is full of experienced growers, and your results might help someone else troubleshoot a problem they're dealing with right now. If this video was useful to you, please hit the like button. It truly does help this channel reach more people who are looking for practical, no-nonsense garden advice. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is a great time to join us. We post new videos every week, and we always keep things simple, affordable, and grounded in what actually works in real gardens. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I'll see you in the next one. Happy gardening!